Hello, and you're very welcome to Kicking Match. My name is Peter Cinnamon, and this is a podcast all about the Irish League. A league where if you look in the mirror and say Aidan Wilson's name 3 times, he will appear and somehow get Glentoran another clean sheet. Look, I don't make the rules, but if I did want to play a game, the rules would be simple. If you want to live in the Linfield Premiership, you'll need to win games. And right now, if you're Portadown or Dungannon, that's a trap you just can't seem to get out of. And I ask you this, what's more scary? Seeing Freddy Krueger in your dreams or Paul O'Neill in your 6-yard box? I'll take the man with knives for fingers, please. He does always seem to get in his opponent's head, but he'll never score enough if he always just slashes at the ball. Plus, after beating everybody else, he never seems to be able to win one-on-one. I have been giddy since the final whistles blew this weekend to finally get talking about these games. Another incredible weekend of fixtures, but I also have been a wee bit buzzing about chatting to this guest, someone who has been working and reporting on this league for years, and I finally built up the courage to send him a little email and see if he wanted to join in the little madness that is this podcast. And I'm happy to say he's here and he's ready to go. I'm delighted to have the Kicking Match debut of the incredibly experienced multi-sports reporter. Hello, Barry Flynn.
Good evening, Peter. How are you?
I'm doing very, very well. You're someone that I, as a fan for a long time, I've listened to your work, and in the past year, I'm sure some people will know, I've somewhat crossed the line into your world. I've been dipping my toe into it, and it's just opened me up to this completely different area. So I've got a little note here: do not make this an interview. Do not indulge into all this boring behind the scenes stuff. But there is so much I do have to ask you, as you're a man who's been following this league for years. I really feel this season has been one of the more unique seasons from top to bottom. And as much as, yes, the top 6 are dominating so far, we're really seeing exciting and unique storylines starting to emerge. And of course, one thing I want to get into with you is you're having a greater focus on the championship. And that seems like, as a league, it's probably as strong as it's ever been.
Peter, I mean, basically, the Irish League has needed a season like this from the start. You know, we've had plenty of seasons where there's been a crescendo at the end, but you always had that notion that Linfield were going to come good. And I'll bring you back to the Linfield-Glentoran game, which was on TV, a couple of Fridays ago. That would match with any of, the games that you would see live on Sky. The atmosphere, the football, the goals, it was all there. And it was the most fantastic advert for local football. So I really enjoyed it. And it's really taken off the league this year. And probably, when you think about it, it's the fact that Linfield have not really got the start that they usually get that has allowed teams like Larne and Glentoran to come through, because for years and years there has been this notion that Larne have been building and Glentoran have been building, and they've had disappointing seasons. They were never quite there, but now coming into November, this is just so exciting. But then again, look at it. Let's have a look at it again in January, and let's see where Linfield are at that stage. But at this particular point in time, Peter, it is just so exciting. You look at the gates, you look at the coverage that the game's getting, and we're in a brilliant place.
It is that new challengers where I think for many neutrals, you are getting excited about. It's like seeing one of those great boxing challengers or champions who have been about for so long. It's just seeing these new stars starting to rise, and we've seen, particularly with Glentoran and Larne, them bubbling away. Actually, I'm sure some people will be here to have a bit of chat about Ian Barclough. Actually, we covered that on a Twitter space this weekend. If you go to the Kicking Match Twitter account, we did a live space. I chatted to some of the guys from the Spirit of 2016 podcast. So if you want some Ian Barclough chat, what's going to happen with the Northern Ireland manager, who could be in the frame next, I highly recommend you go to the Twitter feed and you can listen to like an hour and a half space that I did there. So that's all going to be there because there's so much to squeeze into the podcast here today. And we start with Linfield against Larne. And we'll go with the biggest test of the Kenny Bruce era, the biggest league game in Larne's history, and for me, the best result ever for this Larne team in the league. Going to Linfield's house, the home of the multi-time champions, and winning comfortably with style. Larne 4, Linfield 2. Glentoran's takedown last week felt like a cup game, a highly emotive moment. On the other hand, this game, I thought, on Saturday, it was clinical, it was decisive, and most impressively, it just seemed to be a team who was taking down another team in their stride. It was an incredible result for Larne, but for Linfield, another defeat. Barry, what is going on with that team from Windsor Park?
Well, we were having a discussion with this. Basically, I was having a chat at halftime at the Newry Showgrounds with some of the directors of Glentoran. I mean, they had one of those grins on their faces because they haven't seen this from a Linfield side for so long. And there's a number of theories behind it. And you ask yourself, was the early season exertions in the European campaign, has that had a kickback on Linfield? And also, has there been a psychological blow to the side because they're definitely not the team? They're not clicking the way David Healy would want to. And we've got to this point in time now where it happens periodically that, success at Linfield is winning every trophy. And the fans can turn on a Linfield manager very, very quickly and can hear rumours and things in the background that they're not happy at Windsor Park. And indeed, coming off the pitch on Saturday, the team was given a bit of a rough reception. It hasn't clicked for Linfield, and I don't know why not. It's just hard to put your finger on it. But for the rest of the league, it's a case of get ready to steal, get ready to smash and grab. And Larne, going to that game on Saturday, you would have looked at it and went, well, hold on a second. Larne could get beat 2-0 here because that's the way Linfield do things. You get them in Windsor Park and they put manners into them. They say to them, look, you're coming in to face the champions. You've been playing well, but we're going to actually show you that we're a team. And in essence, Larne to score 4 goals. And there was a period in the match where it was sort of a bit, Linfield were pegging Larne back, but they kicked on in the end. And going 4-1 up against Linfield at Windsor Park is some statement, and all credit must go to Tiernan Lynch for what he's done, because the team was absolutely on fire. I've seen the goals. They were playing with belief, playing with conviction, and Linfield just couldn't live with them. And the longer this malaise goes on for Linfield, you have to say to yourself, there's something rotten in Windsor Park. It could be a temporary thing. Talk to me in January. Trophies aren't won in October. But hey, we're in a different place at this stage, Peter, most definitely.
I can't remember a season where Linfield were sitting after 10 games, 4 defeats, only the 5 wins. And even just take this past week or 7 days, they've conceded 9 goals in that space of time. Like, that is not the type of Linfield team that you would put out there. And not only are they conceding goals, they're finding it difficult to score them as well. And in many ways, this was somewhat coming for Larne. That defeat against Anna in the Cup felt like maybe a dent on how well they've been playing this season. But since then, they've scored 10 and 3 themselves. And what's really been spurring this on is the 2 young strikers, O'Neill and Bonus. They have worked together like a charm this season.
He's like the Haaland of the local soccer's league, Bonus, in my view. What a buy when they went in and got him. He was with Portadown, but you could see that he had that talent to go further. And now he's clicked in that forward line. You're always going to get him on the score sheet. He's always going to pose a threat. But the key thing from a Linfield perspective, and if you go over the Linfield managers over the years, Roy Coyle, David Jeffrey, it was always the mantra that the team that concedes the less or the team that wins the league. And not only did Linfield concede the least, but they also had the goal scorers there to actually put in 3-4, 5-0 performances against most teams in the league. So the key is that they're conceding, and you put your finger on that, but to concede 4 at Windsor Park is unheard of for Linfield. So basically, they've just come up on Saturday against a Larne team just playing with belief, and with O'Neill and Bonus leading the line there, it's potentially for any defence in the Irish League, it is going to be a nightmare. And I say that because Glentoran have only conceded 1 goal since the season began. And that's another example of that philosophy. If you can see less, if you can see the least, you're in with a shout of winning the actual league title. And for years and years, they said any team that finishes above Linfield will win the league title. So I'm going to say that any team finishes above Glentoran or Larne will win the league title, and I don't think that's going to be Linfield at this stage.
They're plenty behind points wise, but they do have the potential players to change it up. I think Michael Clark was talking to me last week, and he was highlighting just the sheer amount of games that Linfield had played up until now compared to the other teams. And when that is the case, and potentially you're tiring or you're looking leggy, is that the time where you start to rotate in? Is this the time where you potentially see the likes of Divine starting more or changing it up in that midfield? You know, because we saw at the start of the season, Chris Shields was this dynamo playing deep for Linfield. And it feels like in recent weeks he's starting to come off the boil. And that will happen naturally. But when things aren't going your way, you've got a big decision to make. You either trust the process or you twist. And right now, David Healy's got that big decision, stick or twist.
David's a very experienced manager. He's very shrewd. He knows his squad. He knows his team. He must have put out a team on Saturday that he thought was going to do the business against Larne. It didn't work. Now, training tomorrow night, Tuesday night, will be very interesting for Linfield. It might even be training tonight after the performance on Saturday. But when you have a squad like that at your disposal, you have an array of riches, but actually getting a team that will be able to play together on the pitch is a different story. Linfield might have just had one of those days on Saturday. We've all had those days, Peter, where it just everything you did just collapsed in front of you. They will come back strong after that, or basically you're going to find that the Linfield support will not tolerate that going forward, heading towards Christmas. So in essence, David's under pressure to an extent. You mentioned about Chris Shields losing that spark. Chris Shields is the dynamo of that team and drives that team onwards and forwards. But I think there's going to have to be a bit of soul searching in the dressing room. People are going to have to sort of speak up and say, look, I'm not sort of pulling up, I'm not stepping up and giving 100% for the blue shirt, because that's what it's all about with Linfield. It's all about playing for the shirt. And as I say, the fans, they'll sense the players aren't playing for the shirt, and they'll let David Healy know exactly who, they'd pinpoint where the problem is.
Final note on Larne, that's a team where every player seems to be busting a gut. They got that goal early from the penalty, and a bit like Glentoran the week beforehand, they came to Windsor and they were ready to play. They were ready to throw their bodies in there. And from one manager who's receiving a bit of blowback from his fan base to one who has had to face a bit of that blowback and has now come out the other side smelling of roses, Tiernan Lynch, he set up that team. He knew he had to change it. And right now, when you compare Larne to some of the other teams near the top of the league, the way they set themselves out, the way they've done recruitment, right now when it comes to Larne, while the rest of the league is zigging, they're zagging. And right now it's working for them.
I think a lot of the... you look back, Kenny Bruce has had the faith in Tiernan Lynch, and Tiernan is a footballing brain, a colossus footballing brain. And people were saying it's going to be Larne's season, last season, the season before. But he set out a plan. He says top six in their first, season up would have been successful, which it was. European football, they got that. They were ticking the boxes. He's a shrewd businessman. He knows exactly that Rome wasn't built in a day. But we've got to this point now where Larne are standing on the threshold. Larne and Glentoran are the two favourites for the league this season. But the other thing is, Peter, it has to be delivered. There's an expectation in Larne that it will be delivered, the league this year. It's okay winning the County Antrim Shield, and a lot of people can be disparaging about the Antrim Shield. But when you look back on the end of a season after the investment that has gone into the club and the development that has gone into the club, the Antrim Shield just won't cut it. So if it's not this season, I have a sense that Larne will be definitely the team of next season going forward, because they have everything in place. And they may just in April have the Gibson Cup in the cabinet at Larne, and that would be absolutely superb to see a team like Larne, because we've all been at Inver Park on wet, dreary days going back and wondering what's the point. But when you go there now, it's a totally different place. It's a reinvigorated town and a reinvigorated football team. And it probably would be one of the best things happened in local soccer if they did take the league and take it out to a so-called provincial club. That'll move the power base out of Belfast. So as we sit tonight, Peter, with Linfield struggling, Larne rampant and Glentoran rampant, we can actually see that Friday night's game is going to be Colossus at the Oval. I'd say you'll not be able to turn a sweet in your mouth. There'll be that many people in the Oval.
Well, let's move on to that team you were just talking about, and a game that you were at. The free-flowing Glens took on one of their most difficult tasks of the season on Saturday, Newry's heavy pitch. City's goalkeeper Steve Maguire was first the villain and then the rallying hero, but it wasn't enough to get a result for Newry. You were there. Were you as impressed with Newry's shot stopper as others were?
After the game, Paul Miller said to me, I was interviewing Paul, and Paul says, I can't remember, what did you call the keeper? I have to plug him here, And I said, Steve Maguire. He says he was just superb. It was like watching how Peter Shilton and Pat Jennings at their best. He just was inspired in that second half. There was a header came in from, a bullet of a header came in from Shane McCartan, which had deflected to McCartan. And the way that Maguire was able to change in midair and tip the ball over the bar, it was just absolutely superb. But it wasn't enough. He was the man of the match, but I said it was a strange type of game because Glentoran began at 100 miles an hour, and Conor McMenamin on the wing was just beautiful. He was just composed. He was full of tricks. And the Newry defender, the left back, Noel Healy, I was speaking again after the game to one of the Newry people, and they said to me, he's in there, he's getting treated for twisted blood. That McMenamin had turned him inside out. It was a bit like, you might remember George Best playing with people he'd stop, said, come on, take the ball off me. But Conor McMenamin was the star. And every time the ball went out, you could see Healy going, oh, here we go again. But he scored a goal on 13 minutes, and we all thought, yep, here we go. This could be 3 or 4. But Maguire showed his class. They got to halftime. It was scoreless. And then in the second half, as I say, Maguire kept the scoreline down. But Newry began to get a couple of chances. It was more, long balls up the field. And most of the time, the Glens defence dealt with it. But you knew a chance was coming, and it did come in time added on. I was unsighted because I thought it was actually Aaron McCary who got down. But it was a great last gasp tackle by Paddy McLean, which was basically it saved 2 points. It saved where got Glentoran the 3 points at the end of the day. And that's the type of luck you need, Peter, going forward, because Carville could have slotted that ball into the back of the net, and that would have been a disappointment. And Larne would have thought, this is our year. But 93 minutes, a tackle like that from the top drawer to deny a goal from a team who hadn't even looked as if they were going to score throughout the whole 93 minutes. That's the luck. That's the breaks you need. And Glentoran fans, players and management were so relieved leaving there on Saturday. But it shows you can have 85% of the possession, but it just takes 1 second. Take your mind off the game and you could have been punished. But McLean, my goodness.
The victory was saved, the 3 points were saved, and as was probably the majority of your match report at that time in the game. An amazing tackle if you haven't seen it, as good as a goal, and McLean just putting his hand up to say, while everybody's talking about how incredible Aidan Wilson's been at the back for Glentoran, I'm doing a pretty sturdy job as well. That back line has really been one of the key differences between Glentoran last season and this season. And a note on Noel Healy, he's not the first and he'll not be the last wing back who has to take on McMenamin. He has kept on his form and his momentum, and when he's got the ball at his feet, you don't know what, because he has so many boxes of tricks to unleash. He can come in and whip it on his left foot. He can run out. You can get to the byline, and when he has so many options in his arsenal, it almost feels like he's unplayable in this league. But Glentoran as a team, I've said it week upon week here, they look terrifying for teams to face, and they have that. Oftentimes when you think of champions in previous years, it's been those runs of brilliant wins, and it's those runs where they just have no fear. They're just plowing through teams, and that confidence is going to be the thing that's going to be key as they go week to week. And going into this Larne game, it was a dreadful fixture at the start of the season. That first game was just a nothing game where they both shut each other out. And we didn't really know how they were going to fare this season. Now we know what those teams really look like. And we'll get to that game later on in the podcast. But that is looking really, really tasty on Friday when those two teams meet. A game which was on a Friday but didn't have all the sparks that we could potentially see this Friday. We went to Stangmore, Dungannon, Ballymena. That was a key game, even this early in the season, for what hopefully Dungannon would be to get out away from the bottom of the table and potentially drag Ballymena in. Because that's going to be the thing for a team like Dungannon. It's not about creating space between them and Portadown. It's also trying to drag these other teams. And Ballymena have been out of sorts. And when Dungannon go ahead, they're probably thinking, we're good at home, we've been solid, now we can finally turn things around. But they let that creek open and they let Ballymena back in for a game where Dungannon looked better than they previously had. They ultimately only have to settle for a point. I guess it's just the two teams that where you can't really slice it right now.
Peter, I watched the game and I was on the internet, and I was going between the Shamrock Rovers game and I was going between the Dungannon game, and it was like chalk and cheese because Rovers had 8,000 or whatever against their local rivals. And then I went back to the Dungannon game. And during the first half, the camera was sort of trained on David Jeffrey, and he had what I would call the look. You know, he wasn't pleased. And I think at halftime, he did say to the players, you need to step up to the mark here. And the second half just played out. And it didn't seem to me that any team deserved to win the game. So they both went away with a point, which seems to just sum up a win for either side would have been something that they would have wanted prior to the game. But they're being sucked into this mire at the bottom. You can see that it's going to be difficult for both sides going forward. All it takes is Ballymena to lose and Dungannon to win going forward, and they're back in the mix, you know, just chasing behind Ballymena. But it wasn't a great game, to be truthful. But a draw was probably a fair result, but not what either team would have wanted.
There are two teams that are probably lacking a real leader, a real experienced cog, and I think both teams have great elements. McDaid is a good player for many of the top six teams still, and he's finally got himself running this season. Dungannon have really dynamic players likes of Reece Campbell and Ryan Mays, and they've really missed McBride this year, and they just as many they've got great players in so far, it hasn't all gelled together. And that goal they conceded feels like just typical of Dungannon this season. They kind of keep it out for a certain point, and then there's just a mistake or a lapse at the back, and there's still a lot of work to do. And you probably compare these two teams against the likes of Carrick and Glenavon, and the difference is that those two teams have real match winners. There's probably not a massive difference 1 to 11, but the little sparks and the creative players that they have, that's why they're getting results, and the likes of Ballymena and Dungannon aren't. And when you have these two teams like Carrick and Glenavon match, you get goals, and we got plenty of them. Another 4-2, and Glenavon are sitting there with the win. It felt like, to me, this game was like a greatest hits of both these teams' season. Glenavon were letting goals in, but there was Fitzpatrick to poke the ball in. Carrick, again, leaky at the back, but they're in a shootout every single week. And we can just chalk off another outside of the box incredible goal from Andy Mitchell.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, completely. I'll tell you what, I went to Moorview Park once, and I observed a scoreless goal, and a scoreless game, and I was stunned because you're always going to get goals at Moorview Park. You know, Glenavon are always going to score, as are the opposition. But 4-2 on Saturday, I mean, they were going back and forward to Grant at the game, and basically, you know, Carrick would have fancied their chances going down there because Glenavon have been in and out. But you look at it, there's Owen Bradley. Owen Bradley has come back to Glenavon, and he's still, you know, putting the ball into the net, doing what he's been doing his whole career. And then, of course, Fitzpatrick, he's always going to be dangerous for Glenavon. So they have the ability, they can raise their game, they have the goal scorers, they have the tactical nous. And I thought Carrick going down there would have fancied their chances because they're a team that play on the up. They're a team that play with a bit of determination and a bit of ambition. And actually, they'll be very disappointed to have gone away 4-2, with 4-2 defeat. But it's been a different season for Carrick Rangers. They've been reinvigorated by Stuart. So they have that extra edge this season, but that match on Saturday was topsy-turvy, and they look on it as 3 points dropped. They would have been happy to get a point out of it, but you can see that as I say, Carrick, I don't think come April will be in that mire that they seem to be in every year, season in, season out. So fair play to Stuart King and fair play to Gary Hamilton. He's keeping his team clicking over, and it must have been an excellent game to be at.
They got pulled into it last season after this really fast-paced start for Carrick, and I think the difference this season will be that they have just improved in some of those key areas up top in the middle of the park, and you have players there that are really playing for the manager and are keen to get these results. And I think actually the success of Carrick this year is going to potentially change the way teams towards the bottom of the league look at some of these more experienced players, because I think coming into the summer, seeing them taking on the likes of Allen and Cushley the season before, and Jim Irvin's still there, Surgeon's floating about, and I think many teams would have thought that's a risk. We're not quite sure if we want to take it. Are they still motivated? Have they still got the legs? Could there be injuries? And look, that could all still happen. It could all still not go the way of them, but
yeah,
they're making it happen so far. And right now, Stuart King's setting this Carrick Rangers team to be in a shootout every single game. And yes, sometimes they will lose 5-0 and sometimes they'll miss out 4-2. But in other weeks, they'll get the results against Dungannon when they need it, or they'll shock Crusaders.
Yeah. Well, I was there for the opening day of the season when they played Newry, and I was speaking to the supporters, and they were mentioning about the shrewd buys. For example, the Curtis Allen. Now, class is permanent. Curtis in the 6-yard box. If he's in or in about and he gets a sniff of the ball, it's going to be in the back of the net, and he's proved that this season. David Cushley. David's always going to be there to sort of hit in his traditional 35-yard effort. You don't lose that overnight. He's bought well, and you have a team of experience, a lot of experience there, which is letting the younger players play. But it's exciting, and the people of Carrickfergus are very excited too, because it's the first time in many seasons that going to Taylor's Avenue, you're actually in with a pretty good chance of winning. And the day they beat Linfield on the Sunday, now I know we're talking about Linfield being maybe off the boil this season, but that was still a massive achievement in front of one of the biggest crowds apparently that have been at Taylor's Avenue in about 20 years. So that's the good times for Carrick Rangers, and they come away at the end of the season with nothing but saving their place in the Premiership. They look back on that day in the sun in September against Linfield as really a sign that a turning point for the good times for that club, and fair play to them.
Well, I'm sure some Glenavon fans, and particularly Gary Hamilton, will hope that his Lurgan side have had their turning point this season. They've had poor results against Loughall in the Cup. They've had topsy-turvy games near the start of the season. But since that defeat to Loughall, they've put 5 against Dungannon. They've been scoring at least 2 in every game. Even in defeat, they're getting 2 goals against Crusaders away, 2 goals against Linfield away. There's 4 on Saturday. Yes, they need to start tightening things up at the back, but at least they're getting the goals, because that was something they were missing at the start of the season. And perhaps Gary will think, okay, at least we're getting the goals. Now it's time to try and tighten things up at the back. It feels as though all that talk from fans that Hamilton's under pressure is somewhat dissipating.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the goals conceded for Glenavon. I mean, they've conceded 22. Their goal difference is +1. And if you go down, you can see that beyond that, it's Dungannon Swiss 28, Portadown with 26 conceded, and Carrick with 24 conceded. Like that, Gary will not be in any way, happy about that goal average or the number of goals conceded. It's a worrying statistic. They have the players up front. They actually put the goals in, which was shown on Saturday in the 4-2 win. But it's the consistency that he needs with people to score the goals, and also to get that, belief within the back line that, let's keep the number of goals conceded down here. And we will start, climbing that table. So it is a worrying statistic that they have conceded 22 goals in the season so far, which is an average of 2 goals a game. With 11 games played so far this season. So, Peter, if they can get the defence sorted out, well, you can see that the goals will follow, and it needs to be worked on, I'd say, from Gary Hamilton's perspective.
Let's move on to our final 4-2, can you believe it, of the weekend. It was a repeat of the opening day barnstormer that made us all so excited for the potential of Coleraine this season. And here we are 2 months later, and a lot of that hope is starting to fade away for Coleraine as Cliftonville exacted their revenge. And so far, since that game at the start of the season, the only other team they've fallen to in defeat has been Larne. Coleraine 2, Cliftonville 4. Another cracker between these two, and Cliftonville will be happy to finally exorcise that ghost from the start of the season.
Yeah, the first game of the season, you can never read anything into it. But of course, people look at the first game and go, oh, it's Cliftonville gone. Coleraine are flying again. The one thing I do notice about Coleraine, and particularly the showgrounds, at present, is the fact that they seem to have been getting fantastic crowds up there. And again, there was a fantastic crowd on Saturday. Cliftonville brought a great support. So the atmosphere is always good in the showgrounds, but you're wondering if they, go off the boil, which they seem to be doing. They're not sort of up there competing. Will that fan base still, stay at the showgrounds? But for Cliftonville to hit 4 goals up there after, what was a tight encounter. But then again, let's be realistic. You've Rory Hale and you've Ryan Curran. They're always going to be the partnership to get the goals. And then if that's not working, you bring on Joe Gormley. And Joe in his 30s is still capable. He just picks a spot, and he'll be always good to get you a goal. And look at the League Cup final last year. He came on and he did the business at Windsor Park in time out at honour and injury time to actually take Cliftonville over the line against Coleraine. Cliftonville seemed to be under Paddy McLaughlin. They had a bad defeat the previous week to Larne, which might be a statement in itself about the ability of Larne. But Cliftonville are not a bad side. They're always going to have goal scoring threat going forward. They have the players, and let's see if they can kick on from that victory over Coleraine, which was a notable victory because they went up there on the new pitch, and they just basically they had a very convincing win. So Paddy McLaughlin's going to have to sit down now and say, listen, where can we take this from here? Let's forget about that Larne game. And I think a lot of people have looked at the Larne game and went, okay, you had a player sent off, and it was one of those bad days in the office. So they've got that monkey off their back with that victory on Saturday. For Coleraine now, they have to sit down tomorrow night. It'll be interesting when it's cards on the table about what went wrong or what is going wrong. They're not a bad team overnight, but 3 points for Cliftonville on Saturday keeps them in the mix, and that will give them the confidence to get rid of that 4-0 reversal against Larne. And we'll see coming into the Christmas period how Cliftonville will sort of shape up coming into the new year.
They're starting to prove that they have this very elusive quality in the world of sports, and that is having a short-term memory and being able to forget about what happened, because they've had these poor results. That game against Coleraine, they were able to move on and continue on getting results. They had that poor result against Larne, and they've just forgot about it, moved on, and they've went up to Coleraine, and they've got those goals. They've got early goals as well. I saw a stat there saying that Cliftonville have scored 5 goals in the first 18 minutes of 10 of their games. So they're fast starters, which clearly helps them. But they have so much attacking talent, which definitely helps things. It'll just be about getting those results against the teams in and around the top 6.
Well, I think that's a Paddy McLaughlin thing too, because from the off wasn't it the goal early in the season? It was the quickest goal scored in the Irish League. It was something like 12 seconds,
of course,
straight from the kickoff, and Cliftonville went one up. I think the philosophy, and it's a very good tactical move, is that the best time to catch a team is right at the kickoff. And if you have a set plan, players run into the box, run into space, and you get that ball up there, you're going to catch them off guard. And Rory Hale scored in 6 and 8 minutes. At that stage, you'd probably think, that's the game over. But say McKendry came back at half-time and it was 2-1. Different game going into the second half. Curran and Gormley kick on with the goals. So in essence, that early start put Cliftonville in the box seat. And I think it is a tactical thing where they know, let's run at them and let's sort of get inside them and mix things up, and we'll see if we can sneak a goal. And it's something that I think Cliftonville do work on.
One thing to highlight on the Coleraine side of things is that win against Cliftonville at the start of the season so far is their only win against a top 6 team. And if we really look back to the entirety of 2022, this has been the big problem for Coleraine. As much as they brought in a whole swathe of new players, Lee Lynch, many others like that, they're still not getting those results against the top teams. They're coming close. They have that draw against Linfield. They go to the Oval and they run Glentoran close with only being 1 goal. But this is ultimately a results business. And what is it going to be that's going to make them more consistent in beating the top 6 teams around them? Because they're able to bully the teams below them. That's so far been fairly okay for them. Is it just changing up how they play? Because that's it. It's so easy when you're doing poorly to go, right, we need to completely go to the whiteboard and change everything because it's clearly not working. But when you come up just 5% short, that's the difficulty, because if you just change it one way or the other, you could regress. So how much do you trust what you have?
You're absolutely right, Peter. I mean, I remember for the last number of seasons, Oran Kearney and Coleraine, there was talk they were always going to be there or thereabouts. I think it was 2 seasons ago they had more or less the league there for the taking. There have been changes to the team, but you have to look at it in context. Larne and Glentoran have set such a pace. This season they have excelled, where you would have expected Larne and Glentoran to be in 3rd and 4th, and maybe Coleraine could have taken points off them in Cliftonville. The last number of seasons, you maybe would have thought that if it hadn't have been a draw between Coleraine and Cliftonville, they could have actually edged a 1-0, 2-1 victory. So they are missing a few points that way, and it is important to say that competing against the top 6 seems to be the problem. It might be that Oran hasn't got the team settled to the extent that he would like, or the extent that he had during the past number of seasons. But I expect Coleraine to click at some stage. The Showgrounds is a bit of a fortress. That knockback they got on Saturday will only inspire Oran to really look at it, try and tweak things. And going forward, I wouldn't discount them at this stage from going on a run over Christmas coming into the new year, because they are a good team. They're not punching above their weight the way they have been. It's just a setback. Coleraine, like any other team, could go through a bad phase like Linfield, but when they click, basically, I think they have the capability on the pitch when they get that belief to go on a run and climb the table. But it is a psychological thing against the top 6, but they're more than capable of mixing it with the top 6. It's just results haven't fallen their way, Peter, at this stage.
Well, a team I do not think anybody should write off going on a run, particularly due to how fantastic their home form has been so far this season, is Crusaders. They swatted away Portadown on Saturday with a 4-0 win. They are still missing so many key players. Heatley, Kennedy, Josh Robinson's out. I was talking to Baxter over the weekend, and he was saying how in many ways the team in some places are walking wounded. Billy Joe Burns was taken off fairly early when they knew the game was wrapped up. And yes, so far Crusaders aren't getting those wins against Glentoran, but they're coming close. They probably will look at that Larne game and think, oh, that was a missed opportunity. And look, they were able to deal with Linfield, and they got a draw against Cliftonville. So as much as I think people are looking, particularly after that cup defeat to Dundela, that, you know what, Crusaders are going to fall away here, they're not going to have the consistency, and then again that Carrick loss as well. I saw something from them which I haven't seen so far previously in the season, is a little bit of strength in depth and a bit of resilience. Macaulay Snellgrove is a player which I hadn't really known a lot about, but he filled that Heatley role excellently. He was pacey, he had the passing, he was hard working, and then you see Lecky come on, and the big thing for Crusaders at the start of the season, people were saying they haven't really got a striker. Who's going to be the one that's going to get all the goals? 4 goals in 2 games It looks as though after so many false dawns over the past year and a bit, Adam Leckie looks like he's arrived and he's ready to be the main man for them.
Yeah, you got to put it in the context, Peter, of the manager. I mean, the most experienced manager by a country mile, Stephen Baxter, where he's been and what he hasn't achieved in the league. He knows exactly where his team are on. He knows exactly the limitations. He's lost the players, for example, like Heatley, but it's a conveyor belt. And you talk about Macaulay Snellgrove. These players are coming on to the Seaview pitch and they're prime. They're just as good as anything that's actually been there over the last 15, 20 years. They're looking for their chance and they're looking for their opportunity. And Adam Leckie, this is his time. He got the penalty and he scored after 20 minutes. And then Jude Winchester, that's another piece of the jigsaw that Stephen sees. He's got an array of riches at his disposal. And if you look at it, they're sitting third in the table. You've Glentoran and you've got Larne. If they hadn't had such excellent starts to the season, any other season, Crusaders would have been first or second place. So you're absolutely right. If it does come together for Stephen Baxter and Crusaders, basically at Fortress Seaview, as I always call it, because it always seems to be a difficult place for teams to go and get a result. They have all the confidence in the world at Seaview, and they will continue to get 3 points at that ground, and they will maintain that. When Crusaders have won the league historically over the number of years, they sort of have always come good at the end of the season. It's something to do with their stamina. It's something to do with their belief. It grows and grows and grows as the season evolves. And Stephen will be absolutely delighted to see that Crusaders are sitting third in the table, because if they don't win the league, they know the financial structures. A European place is so important to Crusaders as it is to all the teams in the Premiership. And Stephen will be sitting happy. He'll be sitting thinking things over. He'll be looking at the next game. He'll be picking a team tactically that he thinks will get the 3 points in the next game. And I mean, 2 defeats at this stage of the season, but let's look at it too. They've scored 26 goals. They've conceded 14, and that is a very good record when you consider it. And you look at the rest of the sides in the league and you look at the top, you see that Crusaders have outscored even Larne and Glentoran. So they have the firepower. And they've conceded 14. Glentoran have conceded 1. So it basically comes back to the old thing about the team that concedes the least. If Stephen can tighten that defence up and they can hold out for more scoreless, just keep the clean score sheets, you know, they could be rampant. They really could be rampant. Okay, given that Portadown, it's been a very bad season for Portadown. You can only play what's put in front of you. But Crusaders obviously blew Portadown away. You say you saw something. There is always something you see. It's the best vantage point in the Irish League. It's the Crusaders. You're looking right down on the pitch. You can see the way players are moving. You can see the tactics. And if you're beginning to see those things, the fans are too. Stephen Baxter's seeing them too. Never write Crusaders off. And at this stage, let's just say that Mr. Baxter, he knows exactly where his next move is within the limitations of, you know, whatever has happened with losing players, etc. But Crusaders as a passing team, a skillful team, and a team capable of scoring goals, they're always going to be there, thereabouts.
Confidence is the word. I think you have Philip Laurie playing probably the best football of his career. Leckie just seems like he's playing angry. I know it sounds very weird, but he just took those goals and was just like he was trying to really prove a point every time he bullied the defender away. You also have McMurray, who could really come good, and a player who so far hasn't really shown what he can do. Even when Dean Ebbe came on, it looked as though he hit the crossbar near the end of the game, and he could be a player who could really come out of nowhere and feel oddly like, I know he is a new signing, but would feel like a new signing come into that team later on in the season. So keep an eye out for them. But you're right, I don't want to get too overexcited about Crusaders, because ultimately they were playing Portadown. They're last place in the league. They've got 1 point after 11 games. They look tired. They look completely without confidence in comparison, and with the likes of Coleraine and Linfield, the next 2 fixtures for Paul Doolan, they had such a poor start to the season, and Doolan kind of talked about how it was getting this team together and that they were playing all of the top 6 teams. They've so far played 4 of the quote-unquote bottom 6 teams based on last season's positioning, and they're sitting there with 1 point. People will say it's early days, but they are looking down They're looking down the rabbit hole here, and it's not good.
I mean, compare the table going back. I mean, a performance such as Portadown so far, they look nailed on to go back into the championship. And when you look at it last season, they come up after the playoff against Anna United, and they got back in. And I think the Portadown support accepted that there wasn't the resources there nor the players to actually mount a campaign in the Premiership. They knew it was going to be a battle, but the position that they find themselves in now, I mean, it's exceeded any expectations Merchants of Doom that would have said about Portadown. And I think, I mean, what can they do, Peter? They don't have the resources. You feel sorry for Paul Doolan. He does his best. The team go out. And even the attendances at Shamrock Park, you can see that they've fallen away drastically because the belief doesn't exist within the town that Portadown are actually going to be competitive this season. And it's unfortunate for a club with such a rich history that they find themselves in this position, and they were put to the sword by Crusaders on Saturday. How do you change it? What do you do? It's a conundrum in itself. Paul has a great experience. He's got, with Portadown, with other clubs. But really, you have to say to yourself that when you haven't got the resources at your disposal, you're always going to be facing an uphill challenge. And I say that within the context that they did come up last season without any great expectation, and that has come to pass. It's been proved.
This is the point now where I finally get to share the experience and ask you some of the nerdy questions about what you usually get up to on a Saturday. I actually did open this up to some of my followers to ask, just when it comes to broadcasting in the Irish League, is there any quirks they wanted to know about, or just ask what really goes down when they do it. Barry, you've been doing this for a fair amount of time, and I'm only a few weeks away from hitting my 1 year anniversary. I'm still technically in my rookie year, and it's been really an eye-opening experience, even in the limited amount of games that I've done doing reports for Sports Sound and on the radio. I'm sure you can remember this very easily. What was game number one in the broadcasting career of Barry Flynn?
It was October 2003. It was Cliftonville against Omagh Town at Solitude. It was 2-1 to Cliftonville. And it was, how would you describe it? In those days, you had 8 games in the Irish League Premiership.
Of course.
16 sides. 16. And you had, and I remember going to some grounds that are completely gone now. And sometimes in the Championship, you go back, you go, oh my God, remember this? Some of the clubs back then, Armagh City, Omagh, Donegal Celtic. Donegal Celtic was always a ground that I always ended up going to. Distillery, my God, that's such a fall from grace for Distillery. But the Omagh Town game, 2004, I remember there must have been about 200 people at Solitude. Cliftonville had not come into their glory days. And it was a nothing game against Omagh Town, who were struggling. But Brian Johnston was the producer. And I had originally started doing Gaelic games. And they were stuck one Saturday. They must have been really stuck. And Pádraig Coyle, who did the Gaelic game, says, can you cover a soccer match? I said, yes. So I went up and did the game at Solitude. And in those days, they used to have, in the studio, they used to have this little feature called Text Desk, which obviously texting was the big thing in 2003. And Adam Coates was the presenter, and Brian Johnston says, can you do a run at that? Where basically you were just reading out the text that people were texting in, and you had to sort of make sure you didn't sort of repeat some of them because they were so libelous and things like that there. So myself and Coatsy used to sit in the studio, and I would be the grounds, and then, Barry, what's happening on the text? Glentoran supporters not happy, blah, 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 blah. And, it was just a bit of entertainment. But I'll never forget, we were doing Text Desk, and we were doing live in the studio. The infamous day where the riot broke out at Windsor Park, Glentoran against Linfield. And that was live on the air, and they stayed with it. They didn't go to news because this was the news. And I remember thinking, hope they're not asking me to read out any text here, because some of the expletives were absolutely outrageous about what was going on, about the PSNI, where the hell were they? And that fella deserved that and all this. So they were watching it on the television or on the news, and it was unfolding. And Joel was actually doing the commentary, and it was the first time that the sport became the news. It was great, and we were just seeing this unfold. And Adam Coates, the Scottish doyen, he was the Jackie Fullerton said at his funeral, sports sound started at 2 o'clock, and Adam would have got out of his seat at 1:45. And Jackie says, "Oh, you on your way to the studio? Aye, it takes you an hour and a quarter to get down to the studio." He was just calmness personified, and absolutely superb. But some of the great memories, going back to 2003, 2004. God, my goodness, that is a long time ago when you think about it. I'd be 20 years at it.
I can't believe that. Like, I was kind of saying, oh yeah, Barry, oh, you've been doing this for ages. I'm thinking, when exactly do I remember hearing you on the radio? But 2003, even your face alone tells me you must have been a young pup doing that.
It was one of those not ambitions. I used to listen to Sports Sound with Adam Coates, and in my early years, I went to a lot of football games. Distillery's right beside me. And I went to see Distillery, the old famous one about you phone up what time's the match start, and the secretary goes, "Well, what time can you make it for?" It was one of those type of things, but you always got a love for the Irish League because people were always trying. And I used to go to Cliftonville games, and in the bad old days, used to go and see Cliftonville against Linfield, and there was actually a football match broke out in the middle of a riot one day. It was actually a bit like that. So always this infatuation with Irish League football. So I decided I'll try this out. I'll write into the BBC, and Pádraig Coyle came back and says, "Yes, we're stuck." And I thought, "You're very stuck." So went around all the grounds. I've been, especially in GAA, you're at every hole in the hedge, covering football and hurling. And over the years, I've been at some places where I went and looked up and went, "What am I doing here?" I remember being at Banbridge Town, and it was an Irish Cup game. It was freezing. The rain was coming through the shed roof, and I thought, "Oh, this doesn't get any worse than this." But every minute has been a pleasure. It's been an absolute pleasure. But don't read the Irish League supporters forum, because there's some people, the keyboard warriors, just think they can do it a lot better than what it is. But yeah, those were the days.
Absolutely fascinating, Barry, because it may have been different sport, but like, do you remember your first ever live broadcast talking about, like, we're gonna go to Barry Flynn wherever you are, and doing those first words? Because clearly my first ones are very vivid in my mind, and I just, the experience, I wonder, is it just the same for everybody? Is it just the most terrifying thing in the world?
The particular Cliftonville Oma game, because it was on the Saturday, we'd have done the Sunday Sports Sound on the AM, and it would have been, very small. But Rod Nawn once said to me, I asked him, "Well, many people listen to Sports Sound?" He says, "Oh, 30, 35,000. I'm all, right, okay. Sports Sound was always on in our house, because if my mother was ironing, she wasn't interested in football, but it was always something that was in the background. And I remember they were going through all the teams, and I was looking at the sheet going, "I'm next. Oh, I'm next." And as I said to you before, I heard Jim Neely say, "If you're not nervous, you're not ready." And even now, you'll get the butterflies in your stomach, because you're just waiting to take that breath and start. Whenever Michael says, "And our man at such and such is Barry Flynn," it was actually Adam Coates, and says, and they always do this whenever somebody new starts on Saturday Sports Sound, and we say hello to Barry Flynn. Barry, hello.
Yes.
And I remember you took the breath, and you've got your notes in front of you, and the next thing you start reading, and then about 10 seconds into it, you go, "Hold on, I'm live on the air here." And all the demons start talking.
You're absolutely right. There is a moment where you start what you're saying, and all of a sudden you go, "What are you doing? Where are you going?" And you're like, just forget and just keep on going. It's such a unique thing, like for yourself, because I came at it from a background of someone who's done radio, and I'm like a music guy, and then I kind of knew the Irish League, and a bit like you get the text, you get the call, "Would you be able to help us fill in?" And for me, Sports Sound, I never even thought of it, because I just thought that's such a big deal. It was really important to me. It was a really special moment the first time I ever did it, because I just thought, this is like no matter, even if this is the only one I ever do, the fact that I could say I once did Sports Sound would be like a massive feather in my cap, because it meant so much to me as a fan, as a listener. And then of course I've caught the bug, aka look at what I'm doing right here. But there's so many bits to it, because It's weirdly a very lonely existence for that 3 hours sometimes. It just depends where you are. But it's kind of like you and this match and your book or your sheet. And I think also what some people, and I don't know how they would realize, but commentary versus reporting is just two completely different things. And I find the artistry of the reporting and the updates, and I'm sure that's the thing that keeps you coming back for more, trying to outdo yourself no matter what game you have in front of you, outdo yourself compared to the week before.
Yeah, well, I always think, sometimes you come home and you beat yourself up and you say, I shouldn't have said this, I shouldn't have said that. That mightn't have sounded the way I wanted to. You always draw a line over it and say, well, next Saturday I'm going to be better than what I was and I'm going to keep improving. You're put in some situations, Michael, or sorry, Peter, you're sitting there.
Here, there's two Michaels, you always got to talk to them. Yes, Michael, let's go.
There used to be too many Barrys working on Sportsound. There was Barry Green and myself, and there was too many Michaels. But you're put in a peculiar situation because you're having to call it as you say it live, okay? And things happen. For example, on Saturday, where my position was, I thought that it was Macaulay, Aaron Macaulay got the save denied. But then when you see it played back, it was actually the tackle come in. But that's a fact of life. You're sitting on an angle. You're having to call it as you say it on the spot. You're not going to get crucified over that. The bottom line is the goal was saved and Glentoran won the game. But it is a lonely existence because you're sitting there and you're always thinking. I remember going to a football match once after I'd started doing Sportsound, and I was sitting and my wife said to me, what are you doing? And I says, I'm working out who's coming off and who's coming on. And she says, well, you just sit and enjoy the game. You're constantly thinking, who's that down injured? Who's that there? But then when you go to an actual match and you relax, you can enjoy it. But you're always going to get situations, whether that be, the cold. I used to come home and freeze and get in the hot bath. And I'll never forget the night I used to do football on a Tuesday night. I was sent down to Newry Showgrounds. They were playing Crusaders. And I thought, great, I'm sitting here. This will be dead easy. This will be sort of, I'll just report, Crusaders win 2-0 or something like that. Didn't they hand every primary school kid in Newry a free ticket to the game? So I'm sitting in amongst about 300 screaming kids. And the next thing, I'm on the air. And because I was the adult, the kids all thought I was like the teacher. And the guy did know I was on the air, but he says, I was saying about, yes, Crusaders, blah, blah, blah. And all you hear coming over the microphone is, Mister, do you know how much a burger is? Right. And that got to the point where on Saturday, Michael was introducing the program and says, now go to Barry Flynn. Barry, did you ever find out how much a burger was in Newry?
How did I? That's brilliant,
Things will go wrong. Things will go wrong, but it's an art to make it think. The world may be falling apart. Years ago, it used to be in the ISDNs, the batteries would always go at the wrong time. On Saturday, there was a bit of interference from the showgrounds, was coming through with the technology. I always get there as early as I can because basically that's, if you can get the problem sorted and you're happy and you're sitting, in situ, ready to go, that's half the battle. But it wouldn't be the first time, I've been standing outside a ground, waiting on a taxi coming up with new equipment. So it gets easier, but at the same time, every day has got its pitfalls and its challenges. And I say, don't beat yourself up if you get the wrong sort of, if you're live, a goal goes in and you can't identify the player, just say, I'll confirm who scored it in the next 2 minutes, and then just feed it through and it comes through. But in this day and age, Peter, we're living in an environment where it's going up online, it's going on Twitter, it's going here, it's going there. And the person sitting there has not got access to all this. And sometimes you would get people, you get it in your ear saying, oh, such and such says that goal, it actually come off so and so. You just correct yourself and say, just to confirm an updated ball, the goal was actually scored by so and so. But it is enjoyable. You love that. You get used to going out on a Saturday. It's a privilege. You're getting your cups of tea. People are nice to you. You're getting free entry into the ground. So you're sitting there, the one person who has been chosen to tell the rest of the audience on the radio what exactly is going on. And the famous commentator, the GAA commentator, Micheál O'Mara Hartig, used to say, paint the story with your voice. Going back to the BBC, there used to be this standard way of doing things. And it used to be, Peter, tell them what the weather's like, tell them about the colours, tell them about the teams. And there was another famous guy, Dennis O'Hara, who worked for the BBC. And his sort of guidance was when you're doing your considered report, you tell them who won, how they won, and why they won. So you just say Glentoran 2, Newry nil, blah, blah, blah. And then you give it your considered piece and you go, they won basically because they had the more flair, they had on Conor McMinimum, they had on the wing a cutting edge. And that's why they won 1-0. So it's a privilege and a pleasure to do it. And but you always know you're always freelancing. You're here today, you could be away tomorrow, but that's just the way it is. Just keep going.
I'm writing all this stuff down. It's fantastic. I love it. It's a new, and I would definitely say it's an art form that I've got into my life that I'm really loving. But you're absolutely right. Until you get that call on whatever day we do get, you never know if that was you're gonna get it for a few weeks. And it's it's different as well now that there's not as many games on a Saturday this season. But no, it's great. And as you said there, sometimes you are just about to say, right, this is what happened, and then a goal goes in, as it did go in for me there on Saturday. And I just see like this. I see the ball go in, and then a player runs over, and there's about 4 of them, and you're like, who on earth is this? And yes, it's weirdly though, it's those moments where, because there's so many moments where you're like, okay, and this happened and that happened, the goal looked like this, and you sign off and you go, well, pat yourself in the back, and then you're about to say something, and then all of a sudden there's a second red card, and you're just going, okay, that's this, and you've got to go. And I think there's 3 elements to it. There's like the journalism of it, of where you've got to write it, you've got to get it correct, and you have to really tell the story of it from the facts. Then there's the creativity side of it, where you want to make it pop, you want to give it life, you want to give it a bit of pizzazz. And then there's also the fact of you're also there to perform this, and I'm going to retweet it onto my feed, because I found a video from the Dungannon media team of you doing your report. Here's a little bit of it here of you doing a report between Dungannon and Glenavon.
But in keeping with the helter-skelter nature of the game, Glenavon, they composed themselves in about 33 minutes it was all square. Their first arriving on the half-hour mark when Gary Breen turned Conor McCluskey's cross into his own goal, and the second a free kick straight out of the top drawer by McCluskey from 23 yards, which was unerring in its accuracy. At 2 each, it was at half-time after a whirlwind of a first half. The second half was, though, a bit of a letdown. On 58, Matthew Fitzpatrick was unlucky to see his header come off the Swift's crossbar, while at the other end, Ryan Mays saw his own effort come back off the bar after he had carved out an excellent chance. But on 83, Mays was the talisman in setting up Dungannon's third and the winner. He got to the byline to cross, and the unlucky Matthew Snoddy turned the ball into his own net. In the end, the Swifts, they dug in, they fought throughout, and their heads didn't drop when Glenavon pegged them back. They were, in essence, worthy of their win. At Steinmore Park it ends, Dungannon Swifts 3, Glenavon 2.
And if they go and see that, that's you working your magic there, but you can see your hands are moving, and it was great for me to see that, because I'm thinking I'm going crazy when I'm doing it. I have to ask you this, because it's what some people have sent in. So from your time, a question in from Chip asking, from what you've seen over the years, what team in particular has been the most entertaining team you've seen? And he highlights Tommy Breslin's Cliftonville side.
Yeah, well, we soft spot for Cliftonville, but just to bring you back, Peter, to that thing about that Dungannon thing, we had the lip mics for years, and I always found that if you can't use your hands, you need the expression to use your hands. But going back to Chip's question, unfortunately, when you're down the pecking order, the great teams like Cliftonville and Linfield, you're basically you don't get to see them at first hand. And I always thought that Cliftonville were the most entertaining passing team. I'd have to say Paddy McLaughlin's Institute before he went to Cliftonville were a pretty great passing team. But unfortunately, like Adam Coates, who I worked with, Adam Coates, he was from Scotland. He worked in the Sunday Post, the Glasgow newspaper, but he was down the pecking order. And I says, well, what did that mean? He says, well, I didn't get to see Rangers or Celtic. I was always sent to see Queen's Park playing in front of 200 people. So Cliftonville, the team that won the league under Breslin, absolutely superb. The Linfield sides under David Jeffrey were always, technically brilliant, and they were head and shoulders above the rest of the league. But the most entertaining side, I would say, is I'll always love going to Glenavon because, as I said, you'll always get a goal or two. And for a team that's up and at them and shows a bit of Dungannon on their day when they're feeling a bit hungry and when they want to have a bit of a fight, there's always a good scrap down at the Swifts. And I remember many's a day being down there. They were 2-0 down, coming back to win 3-2. And the people of Dungannon who do go to those games on their feet because that made their weekend, because their team were battlers and they always were capable on their day of giving a great demonstration. And I always loved going down to Stangmore.
I really want to get into this week's games, but there's one or two things I have to ask, so we'll swiftly get on to this. And I have to ask someone in this position how they feel about football cliches, because it's a massive part of our life. When you're there reporting the game, there's just language of football that you have to use and you dip in between it. And when I first started, I literally sat myself down after my very first game and just wrote a load of adjectives of just, how did he do it? Did he lash it in? Did he whip it in? Did he rifle it in? How do you find freshening it up, balancing it all in? And do you ever get that thing of, wait, I can't say I rifled it, I said that last week, and was that goal, how did he do it? Did he poke it in? Did he plot it in? Did he slide it in? Is that the thing that's going on in your head, or is it just when you're writing down your report and your little updates, is the free flowing stream of consciousness?
Do you know what I do, Peter? I listen to Radio 5 Live because some of those clippy reports, those 30 seconds things that are just put through, the turn of phrase sometimes, say, I'm going to use this, I'm going to use that. There's only so many ways you can actually describe a goal going in. The one I love is, and it fell beautifully, and he said, thank you very much, and it was 1-0. It was on 2 weeks ago, and I was doing Warm Point against Institute, and it must have been the worst game I'd ever been at for the first half. And it just came to me, inspiration. I was summing it up, trying to make it sound good. And it got to the point at the end, I says, well, look, Grant, we're in dire need of a goal. Too much perspiration, not enough inspiration. And that was basically summed it up. They were running about and they were sweating.
Tremendous.
And if ever you wanted to encapsulate 45 minutes, they were running about like headless chickens, but nobody was actually doing anything worthwhile. So too much perspiration, not enough inspiration.
Stick that in the locker for sure.
And at this time of year, I always every year, I always do the old John Oates, Ode the Autumn and Seasons of Mist and Mellow Fruitfulness. That's something, welcome to Milltown in this season of mists and mellow fruitfulness, all this sort of stuff from school you remember. But look, it comes to you will repeat, 2 or 3 times a lot of things that you sort of have come up with. But I love the witty, the witty. Sometimes somebody heard that who was work with, and he says, I heard that when I was driving down the M2 and I laughed out loud. And I thought, well, that's good because that's something different. It's something different. A lot of them have no interest in Warm Pointing as Institute, and it's just music in the background. But to hear a line like that, I think it summed up 45 minutes of dirge-like football. It really was.
It's funny, sometimes you think 6 goals is hard to put together, but sometimes you just, at least you know what you're doing. Half the time when it's 0-0 at half time, we're like, well, what chances am I highlighting here? And the other side of it, of course, is that you're half listening what other people are doing, and you were doing your report this weekend and you were getting into it, and they peppered the goal, and I literally had my notes and I just went, right, well, that's out. Crusaders that no longer did they pepper the goal. It has to go. It's just it's a very funny. I know it's a very behind the scenes stuff.
You basically have to sit down. You have to sit down, Peter, and say to yourself, you've got people listening to a game that they're probably no interest in, because a lot of them, as I say, are just listening to sports sound in the background. And in the championship, you got to say to yourself, a lot of people really have no interest in this, but you need to make that within 45 seconds. You've got to aim to make some guy saying, I'm going to get the keys and go down to that game because it actually sounds very good. You got to make them want to be there. You've got to paint a picture, and you got to make them say, my God, why are you sitting in the house? You need to be sitting here at this game. The other great one I used to do, it's usually when Grant's and he's doing the studio. There was a game, I can't remember who it was. I think it was Bangor, one of those ones years ago, and they were winning 1-0 at half time against the odds. And I says, so there you have it from Clannyboy Park for Bangor. Oh, they're halfway there. But in the second half, maybe
That's a classic one.
Yeah.
I knew someone had said that. I do remember that. And again, the two final questions we have Anonymous and we have a Barry K. So you can answer this very quickly, Barry. Over all the years, I'm putting this more diligently. You know, you're asking some of the tough questions against managers who always haven't got a great result. Have you had any run-ins over the years with managers after asking a particularly difficult question?
Oh, goodness. I'll never forget. It was David Jeffrey's 57th birthday, and it had been muted throughout the whole show. Well, is he going to get a win on his birthday and whatever? So they actually drew, and David came up, face like thunder, you know. And I thought, okay, here we go. And it wasn't the usual sort of elaborate answers because they conceded two in the last sort of 10 minutes against Dungannon. And at the very end, I said, well, David, 1 point today, but it's your birthday. Will you maybe celebrate tonight? And I was, oh, Barry, it's just about football at this stage. And I just thought, and then there was silence. He just wasn't in the mood to talk. And I handed back to Michael, and Michael says, listen, look, as if Barry's getting a birthday kiss this afternoon. And look, you got to appreciate too that this is a results business, and sometimes you need to actually pitch what you're saying. You have to be very careful about what you're doing, what you're saying. But yeah, you learn as you go along.
Very much so. And the final one does come from that, Barry K. Succinctly, you've given us lots of ideas about how to improve and give this a go. Any advice for anybody young out there thinking of giving this a go? What can they do to get those skills ready so that when they get that call to say, hey, we need somebody, they're kind of prepped and ready? What can they do in the meantime?
It's all about rhythm. It's all about, if you sit and speak into a microphone the way that you would speak to your friends in a bar, it's not going to work. When you're speaking, you need to speak from a different part of your brain that is being used actually to just dictate. And it's almost like acting. You just need to have the delivery. You need to have the turn of phrase. Keep practicing and practicing and practicing. The first thing that was told to me is, remember, you've got 40 seconds. Do not go over that. And Brian Johnston tells me that whenever he was starting off, his producer had a stopwatch and told him every time he went over 45 seconds, he was pulled on the Monday, because the worst things you can do is crash the pips, is what they call coming up to the news. And many a time it's a case of, we have to get an update after the news. But you're not speaking. You need to actually put your brain in a different gear to deliver, because you're saying, right, here we go, 40 seconds, and it's got to be da 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 da. And if you've got it written out in front of you and your punctuation's there, you know when to stop, you know when to pause, and you know when to split it up. You know when you're coming to your two-line conclusion, and always give the scoreline at the end. So it's practice and listen to other people.
And just like the wheel, this league keeps on turning. Plenty of tricks and potentially some treats set to be on show this weekend. Barry, will you get a game full of goals or not? We'll have to find out. Expect some fireworks. More than likely, probably somewhere off in the distance. It feels like time of year you always get it randomly going off during the 3 o'clock games. But we'll start with the games being played on Friday night. And the big one, Glentoran against Larne. It was snooze town at the start of the season when this was the curtain raiser. They're back playing on Friday night and they're going down to the Oval. The top two meet, and we've seen a lot of big games this season where each team have really cancelled each other out. I'm talking about Linfield, Coleraine, Crusaders against Cliftonville, Glentoran against Larne. Do you feel it in your water where this could be the back and forth, top of the table game we've all been crying out for?
Well, I think it'll be hard to top Glentoran against Linfield at Windsor Park, but I have a funny feeling that you're going to get a crowd in the region of 6,000 or 7,000 at the Oval on Friday.
Wow.
And it's going to be nowhere like that opening game of the season, because this is going to be on the grass. It's going to be under lights. There is basically so much at stake at this stage, maybe psychologically. You look back to Larne, they won the playoff game at the Oval there at the end of last season. But things have changed since then. Glentoran have more belief. Larne have more belief. Something's got to go. unbelievable game. And personally speaking, after Larne giving Linfield the going over on Saturday, it wouldn't put it past them to actually go to the Oval and get a victory. Maybe not 4-2. It could be a tight game. Larne could sneak it 1-0. But if Glentoran score early, get that confidence, we'll see where that takes them. But it's very hard to call, Peter. But it's a great occasion for the Irish League.
It really is. And you're right about going early. I feel as though that's what's been a real key to Glentoran's success so far this season, has been going in front early, or at least powering men forward so that the other team has to retreat. And we've only seen it once this season. It's the only goal they've conceded, which is talked about every week on this podcast. It was against Crusaders at home at the Oval, and when they went behind in that game, they were able to snatch back and make it even quite quickly. What I'm fascinated about seeing is if Larne do get the goal early, which is probably what they want, and it's what they got against Linfield, how does this Glentoran team react? It feels as though there's a lot more steel to this team. That spine of Glentoran is as good as it's been for them in, the 15 years since they last won the league, and how pivotal this could be one way or the other where the Gibson Cup eventually goes. It's hard to argue against that. It won't be some sort of 1-1 or 0-0, but what confidence either team would have if they were able to run out of the Oval with 3 points.
Well, basically, I think that Glentoran at the Oval too, I mean, at the Sydenham end, if they're playing into the Sydenham end in the second half and they're a goal down, the crowd will almost suck the ball in for them. You would fancy them to score into the Sydenham end at some stage if they get that momentum. But being at the Oval, I think, could be crucial for them. But listen, it's absolutely mouth-watering at this stage of the season. A Halloween classic. Glentoran against Larne. You mentioned about this time of the year, you usually hear, firecrackers going off outside the grounds. Well, at least we're not in the position they were in the 70s where reporters were going, were they firecrackers or shots? So we're in a better position in the Irish League, and I think Friday's going to demonstrate that. I mean, top class all round.
That's what this league has really picked up over the past few weeks, I would say, just due to some of the brilliant results, but an incredibly exciting game. I really can't call it one way or the other, so I'm going to be boring and go for 1-1, but a fixture that is rarely boring if the past few seasons are anything to go by. There was drama when these two teams played at the start of the season. It's going to be live streamed by the BBC. Ballymena go to Mournview Park. Will there be red cards? Will there be last minute goals? What will there be here in this game? Two teams who you don't know who's going to turn up from one week to the next. If you're Glenavon, you'll hope this is the game where they can create a bit of space between them and Ballymena and move towards that 6th, 7th place, which is really their aim at the start of the season. Are you feeling it one way or the other here?
Funny, Glenavon for the last number of seasons seemed to be that, top 6 has always been an ambition. Basically that's the start or the aim at the start of the season. Funnily, I do think that they will beat Ballymena on Friday night, because I do believe that Ballymena are not the side, and that's pretty evident by the table. They don't have the ammunition to sort of put it to Glenavon, especially at Mournview Park, and a team that scored 4 goals last Saturday. They will see Ballymena is there for the taking. So I would expect Glenavon to come out on top there, and 3 points for them will be a boost to the season. But as I say, unless Ballymena gets some belief back, but there's no evidence, Peter, at this stage to suggest that Ballymena can put in the performance to come away with 3 points from Mournview Park. We shall see.
I would agree with you there. I think that's potentially 2-3-0 win for Glenavon. They're getting their mojo back. It's can they hold back Ballymena? I think they're really missing some of their key players from last season. We go to Solitude, and Carrick Rangers are welcomed there. Cliftonville were able to fire plenty of goals against Carrick when they played earlier on in the season. Carrick Rangers don't seem to have tightened up that leaky defence. They scored 4 on Saturday. Do you see a similar amount of goals in this game?
Peter, for teams coming to Solitude, especially from the lower half of the league, or teams such as Carrick, it's a bit like they need to park the bus, because being at Solitude over the years, you can see that Cliftonville will break sides down at Solitude. They'll either do it very spectacularly or they'll win 2-0 or 2-1. They'll get there in the end. For Carrick, it's a case of maybe getting Cliftonville on the break, get the ball up there, see if Curtis Allen sort of can work his magic. But you would imagine that Paddy McLaughlin has moved Cliftonville to a different mindset from the defeat to Larne. That was shown last Saturday by the result up at Coleraine. So on the 3G, 4G pitch at Solitude, I would fully expect Cliftonville to excel, pass and move, show a bit of flair, and I could see them actually, if they get an early goal, they could run out 2-3-0, 4-0 probably, maybe. Carrick go there in more than hope than expectation. They've got more important games, and I'm wondering at this stage whether they're just saying we're in a good position now. Okay, we got a point at Solitude, it would be brilliant, but you feel Cliftonville hold all the aces and they'll up the gear to get the result that they need.
Oh, if you were Cliftonville, would you do that little routine again? That one where they scored in 20 seconds? Wouldn't it be just amazing if they said, what if I try this again? But I do agree with you. I think it's not if Cliftonville score, it's potentially how many. But Carrick Rangers have proven that they are willing to go down in a firefight. They're willing to shoot out with anybody, and perhaps they can get the goals to keep up with Cliftonville. But I would agree. I think it's probably a 3-1 there to the home side. Coleraine will look.
Sorry, I'm just saying, like Stuart, he will be urging them on right to the death. But a funny thing that I've noticed about for example, games more recently in the Irish League and across the other leagues too, is that say if a side goes in leading 3-0 at half time, they sort of take the foot off the gas, and instead of years ago they went out and won 6 or 7, teams are a wee bit more professional now. They're saying let's conserve our energy. So Cliftonville will want the early start, but we'll see how Paddy gets them prepared for that. Coleraine, you were saying, Peter?
Coleraine will want to bounce back after that result against Cliftonville, and they welcome a team who probably wish it was somebody else sitting opposite them. The way things have been going for Doolin does not get any better. They go up to the Coleraine showgrounds, and Coleraine just will hope this is a get-good game, and Portadown will try and restrict them and hope that they can get a goal, any goal, and it will be enough to take the points back to Shamrock Park. But I'm not particularly confident in that potential reality happening.
No, I think psychologically, Portadown, they're up against it in every game they go into, especially Coleraine. They'll know Coleraine will have to bounce back after the defeat to Cliftonville, and if they lose an early goal, you would worry about it. But it's just, they seem to be the whipping boys, Portadown. Every team will fancy, when they're playing against them, and going up to Coleraine in the showgrounds is just another massive ask for Paul Doolin.
I think that's a Coleraine win, potentially 2 or 3. It's not if they score, it's very similar to Cliftonville, it's when. Crusaders go to Stangmore Park, and a ground actually where Dungannon have been able to hold the big teams. They've been able to restrict the likes of Linfield and Glentoran to only 1 goal. Now, that doesn't get them any points or results, but it's something where you can see a real distinct Jekyll and Hyde reality when it comes to their home form against their away form. That's a tight pitch. Even with the new pitch, it's still tight there. And could they frustrate a Crusaders side away from home? After seeing Crusaders, it feels like to me they have enough firepower and enough gas in the tank to keep up their momentum. And if I was Stephen Baxter, I think you're not looking anything beyond this game. They want to keep pace, and they'll look at least the foreseeable future. It's a week-by-week process, and I think they'll be prepared for whatever Dungannon Swifts will throw at them on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah. It's a strange sort of factor that the new 3G, 4G pitch at Stangmore Park, people are saying, is it suiting Dungannon or is it not suiting Dungannon? They're always a battling team, that getting down and dirty in the mud when the going was against them, that they were capable of, putting in that shift and putting it up to teams. But the best performance I saw at Stangmore Park all season was early in the season when Coleraine went down and they actually dismantled the Swifts 4-0. That was a sublime performance by Oran Kearney's team, but had everybody sitting up and taking notice. Crusaders, I think, because it's on a 3G, 4G pitch, they'll be used to that. Baxter will have them primed. And I see Crusaders coming away with a convincing victory, in my view, from that game, because they can sense something at Seaview, and they'll not be allowed to take the foot off the gas. And I think Dungannon may not be able to live with their pace. And Crusaders and their goal scoring ability, I think they're nailed on for an away win.
I would agree with you there. Exactly the way you've seen sometimes for Dungannon, they get caught out between their centre backs. I think in the form that Adam Leckie's in, he's going to exploit that. So I would bet that Leckie's going to keep up his good run of form there. And finally, wrapping up 6 games out of 6, Linfield return to the Newry Showgrounds, a game that could have been a banana skin for the Blues earlier in the season. They were able to come out of that with 3 points. Newry were able to restrict Glentoran to only 1 goal, and as we talked about, it wasn't for a last-ditch tackle. They could have sneaked an upset. If you're Newry City, I think you're going again. It's a similar game, 2 weeks in a row, and they'll think, we came close last week, we could come close again. But I don't know if I'm willing to say that the Linfield poor run is going to continue. I think they'll scrape this very much the way Glentoran did. But Newry are going to be a tough test down there at the showgrounds.
Well, they're expecting a very big gate down for this game. Linfield coming to town. Darren will see them as vulnerable. The fact that Glentoran came last week, they were not vulnerable. Glentoran played in the first half as if they were invincible. It was only when Newry got a sense in the second half that they should go route one, or maybe sort of try and, mix it up with the back line, that they opened up that chance. But Linfield are going down there. They're not like the muddy pitch. They're not like basically going to the showgrounds, especially in the situation that they find themselves. The pressure's there. David will be very happy going down there and getting a 1-0 victory with a goal in time added on, because it's 3 points in the bag. But how they get that win to him is not important. But it'll be interesting to see how Darren approaches this game. He'll have taken a lot out of the Glentoran performance. Maybe they stood off Glentoran, give them too much space and time in the first half. They've nothing to fear facing Linfield, but then again, it's a wounded animal, and they could go down there and win 3 or 4-0. We don't know. That's the beauty of this game. But Newry against Linfield. If Newry do win, well, there'll be alarm bells ringing around Windsor Park, and it'll not be a very nice sort of reception that the team will get down at the showgrounds. But listen, that's the beauty of the game.
It doesn't get any easier for Noel Healy. He's now got Joel Cooper he has to contend with, and that could be a key area of the game. I agree. This is just win and get out of Dodge for Linfield. They'll take whatever they can. And just before we wrap up, we have Newry City, last season's winners of the championship. They've been a breath of fresh air, if I can say, this year in the league. And you're a man who's had a greater focus on the championship this year. Incredibly exciting league, to the point where now all 3 of the top teams going into this Saturday all lost. Tell us a bit about what's going down in that league, who are the runners and riders, and how the rest of this season could play out, because it's really hard to predict at this stage.
Well, I think Michael Clark needs to take some of the blame, because he interviewed the 3 managers last week, and they played the clip on Sports Sound, the top 3 managers, and they all went and lost. But that's the beauty of the actual championship. The only team that benefited were Warren Point, who actually got the 3 points. Now, I think Barry Gray is shrewd enough and long enough in the tooth to mould that Warren Point team where they'll be sort of towards the end of the season, they'll be in contention. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Loughall and Anna, they've gone at it from the start of the season. They've had fantastic cup results as well. And indeed, Loughall have beaten their close rivals, Glenavon, twice in cup competitions, and Anna have beaten Larne. It's exciting. That particular pocket of County Armagh between Portadown and Loughall has just seen a rejuvenation and a rebirth of football, to the detriment of the Portadown side. for some reason. So you've got these two teams now at the top vying to get into the actual Premiership. Anna were unlucky last year not to get there. They lost out to Portadown. But I remember, as I say, going to see Loughgall when they were in the top flight back in the day at Lakeview Park. It would really be a boost for, I think, local soccer in general, the Premiership in general, if one of those teams were to get through. And another historical breakthrough, and I think they could do it under Niall Curry, is Dundela, the wee Duns, who have lived in the shadow of Glentoran for the last 100-odd years. But they have that great history. They won the Irish Cup in 1955. You go to Dundela on a Saturday and there's 200-300 people. They've always been Dundela fans. They don't see themselves as Glentoran fans. And I think that would be really exciting. They've got the ground done. Could you imagine Glentoran against Dundela in the Premiership on a Saturday in East Belfast, up at the Hen Run, as it's called? It would be superb. So those teams, Anna, Loughgall, they had the whirlwind start. They need to maintain that. But waiting in the background there is Dundela and Warrenpoint. Warrenpoint have the experienced manager. I think they have the belief. They will keep tagging away. And Dundela under Niall Curry, even though they lost on Saturday, they have the ability. So those four teams come April will be in the mix. But I do think whoever goes up, Warrenpoint have been there, but between Anna, Loughgall and Dundela, I think would reinvigorate the league if one of those teams or two of those teams were to go up, and especially Dundela, because that would make things in East Belfast so interesting.
You're right there. Loughgall and Anna have really continued on their fantastic run of form at the end of last season. Loughgall really came very close, and if it really wasn't for their poor start to the season, they probably would have been able to shout with not only winning the league but potentially nicking Anna's place in that playoff. Anna United have built a really cohesive team where they know exactly what they want to do, and you probably look at Loughgall and Anna and think where they are benefiting from is they've just been stealing the pockets from Portadown, and they, you know, if you could almost form a team that has the players from Loughgall and Anna United Portadown, you know, you could really have a Premiership quality squad there, and the potential of Dundela, I think, is massive. East Belfast is really a quite transient place, and lots of people move there, and you look at Dundela with this no strong history one way or the other. I can see a lot of people going, this is the team that I want. I think that could be a real upstart team in Belfast. See where he goes for the Welders with their brilliant ground. Ards are getting some results, and I did not think that Warrenpoint were the worst team last season, and if it wasn't for their results against Portadown, they could still be playing Premiership football. So a lot to play for, and just from what you've seen, some players I think are brilliant in that league, the likes of Mullen and Anna, it could be a real star. Callum Ferris at Loughgall is this big bustling striker. There's great players in that league who could be lighting it up in the Premiership very, very soon.
Well, yeah, you look at ours, you look at Adam Sally and Eamon Skinnell, they're banging goals in. And it's brilliant in a way too, because Michael and I were talking on air about, you know, the pedigree of the teams there and their Premiership. You know, Ballymena were a fixture in the Premiership for at least 15, 16 years. You've got Ards. Ards are like the sleeping giant. They're going to be getting their ground hopefully soon sorted out in Newton Ards. You have Dundela, you have Loughgall with that history too, Warrenpoint. So these teams, you know, they have got that pedigree in the top flight. So it's an interesting league. And I think hopefully I said the Desi get up to Dergview on Saturday. They're having their own issues at the bottom. They're playing Anna United. So their game was postponed. And then the game before that was abandoned because of the injury. There was a head injury on the pitch, so they haven't played in 2 weeks. But we're going to get an insight hopefully into what has gone wrong, because that's the club that gave Glentoran the great game in the Irish Cup earlier. So there's something not 100% there, but yeah, and Newington's another team that is growing in stature. They're playing at Solitude. They have their own distinct sort of area of Belfast, that limestone road. It's not the Cliftonville road, but they share with them. It's a bit like Dundela. They see themselves as Strandtown, which is a unique part of East Belfast as well. And whereas the Oval is more in the lower part of East Belfast and has its tradition there. So there's room in East Belfast for 2 Premiership teams. And I say, bring it on. It can only sort of make the league more exciting.
It is really, really exciting. And of course, next season, you could see high rising Ballymena up there. Bangor could return to that. Like, that could be a real stellar 12 teams. But it's been amazing to have you here, Barry, today. So much stuff to talk about, and I must ask, can you remember what the score was at Solitude that day back in 2003?
It was 2-1, and I remember my first cliche because Cliftonville were winning 2-0, and Joel came over and says, Barry, there's been a goal at Solitude, and I says, yes, it's come for Oma, and it's game on at Solitude, right?
Yes.
20 minutes to go, it's game on, 2-1 Cliftonville. Back to you, Joel. Well, the other big one is, it was the cherry on the icing on the cake. That's a big one.
I remember I once did another bite of the apple or the cherry. I got that one wrong, and like, is that a saying? Well, another bite of the apple? And I don't think it is. Barry, where can people find great things by you online, or do you highly recommend them checking out the BBC's output? That's where they find your best work.
Oh, basically, do you know there's a Nerds website? You should look it up. It's called Commentators Database. You're probably
I'm not.
Some guy in England.
Okay, go. I have never seen this.
Look up Football Commentators Database and your name will be in it, because some guy sits in England and he updates every local BBC commentary and game. You wouldn't believe it. It's great.
Wow. I have to check this out as I call it my 1 year anniversary doing it. I have to check what that's but no doubt you all the time will be there. But no, Barry, thank you so much for being on, and all the best, and hopefully I'll chat to you soon.
Talk soon. It's been an absolute pleasure, Peter. Thank you very much.
And there we have it. A busy show this week, a fantastic show this week. I thought Barry was unbelievable. So much stuff to share. This is a man who goes to games constantly, seeing lots of different teams in the league, and you can just see all the knowledge and passion and experience just flooding out. I feel we could have talked for another hour, 2 hours about the league. Definitely someone I'll be super keen to have on. And that is it. No more Halloween puns. I promise it's over. I tried to squeeze in as many. I don't really think you can have any Irish League costumes if you tried. But if you do, well done. If you are listening to this to the very end, thank you very much. You've probably been here before, and you probably know I'm going to go follow me on all the social media platforms. I'm now doing random podcasts off the cuff. If you did not follow at Kicking Match on Twitter, you would have missed the Barclough stream. So you gotta get on it. Get on Twitter. I'm a big man for gifs. At Kicking Match on Twitter, at Kicking Match on Instagram, at Kicking Match on Facebook. All three are where you want to be. And I've seen you people out there. You've been listening to me and you're giving it a go. Because I can see now there's a proper percentage of you people who listen to this podcast using your smart speaker. Hey, you did it. We finally did it. We're getting into like proper big digits of you guys listening to this podcast. Whoa, sorry. What are you saying? Person listening with headphones? You don't know how to listen on smart speaker? Oh, let me tell you. What you do is you go to your smart speaker, hopefully close to it. You put on that funny accent that you do when you talk to it, and you go, hey, smart speaker, play, and this is the important bit, play Kicking Match, an Irish League podcast. And what's amazing, she'll somehow try to speak the title that I put on this. I did it, and I heard they're going, oh, blah, 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 Kicking Match, and then one of the weird titles. So if you've listened to this and heard the weird title, hurrah. Anyway, thanks for listening. All the best. I want to see everybody dressed as skeletons at these games. Have a good one. See you next week. Toodles.